I asked ChatGPT, why does NCM811 degrade more than NCM111? And this is related to lithium ion battery degradation mechanisms of the cathode. NCM is a cathode material. 811 means it has 80% nickel, 10% cobalt, 10% manganese, versus it's a 1:1 ratio for NCM111. The first reason it said was voltage decay. The longer explanation that I didn't write here that it gave was that the cathodes, NCM811 cathodes, operate at a higher voltage than NCM111 or other nickel compositions, and that higher voltage can lead to more side reactions. But as far as I know, all cathodes are basically operated in the same voltage window, around at the upper limit around like 4.1 to 4.3 volts. So that's kind of deceiving. Like, that voltage window is set by the battery management system. But I guess it is true that at the same voltage, so if you have like an NCM811 and an NCM111 and you have them both at a voltage window that goes up to 4.3 volts, the 811 will degrade more. But that's the question I'm asking, why? So you set the voltage window. It's not a good reason. Okay, the second one, reduced structural stability causing electrode cracking. Yep, NCM811 has less structural stability. The deeper explanation, it says that it goes through structural changes during charge and discharge cycles, like more structural changes for NCM811 than NCM111, which is kind of true. And it says that those structural changes expose more active sites for undesired reactions, which I think it means like CEI formation or cathode electrolyte interphase reactions. But that's not what the structural stability does, right? It does the lithium nickel mixing. So as you cycle the lithium in and out of the cathode during charge and discharge, the lithium's going into the layered structure. That's a R3M space structured lattice of the material, right? And as it's doing that movement, some of the lithium is going into the sites where the nickel would be, and you have the lithium nickel mixing, which is what it should be saying in ChatGPT, but it isn't. The third reason it gives for why it degrades more is lithium plating. That's weird. It says that it's more likely to occur at higher rates of charge, which is true, but I don't know if there's much of a difference between the lithium diffusion rates in 811 versus 111. Maybe somebody else can answer that here. Voltage-induced oxidative stress. So this is what ChatGPT is highlighting to say that as you cycle to a high voltage, it leads to the degradation of the electrolyte onto the cathode material, which then establishes that CEI layer. But it calls it SEI here, solid electrolyte interphase, which is true, but like in the industry, I feel like we call it more CEI. SEI is typically just what we call it on the anode. But it's hard to say that the difference in composition would more or less cause a different SEI layer to form. Like, maybe sometimes with the structural instability that it would cause like a decomposition of the electrolyte more often, but that also has to do with the electrolyte composition. So it's hard to like make that assumption here that would be a root cause of this difference in degradation. It also called out temperature sensitivity, which you know what? That's a good question. I'm not sure if temperature really affects the difference in degradation, like if NCM811 is less stable at a higher temperature. It says that higher nickel content can lead to thermal instability. I'd have to look into literature to prove that. But it could be one of those things that like just exacerbates, like the temperature would exacerbate the lithium nickel mixing. So I could see how that's true. Interesting. And the last one it calls out is limited protective mechanisms. So it says that the NCM811 cathodes have fewer inherent protective mechanisms compared to lower nickel cathode compositions. So they're more susceptible to capacity fade when exposed to stressors like high cycling and deep discharges. But it's very vague what those protective mechanisms are exactly. I think this is more of a buzzword than a scientific term. The bottom line is this really doesn't cut it for cathode knowledge here, and you gotta go to Google Scholar. There's some great review papers. Actually, one I found was just published this year, 2023, and it's pretty cool.